Hi everyone, welcome to the Princeton Review's webinar, Getting Personal with Your Personal Statement. My name is Scott, and I'll be co-hosting today's presentation, along with our resident med school admissions expert, Anita. Everyone's lines are muted, but if you have any questions during the presentation, please put them in the GoToWebinar chat box. We will do our best to get through everyone's questions at the end of the presentation, but if you have any questions that don't get answered, we will certainly follow up with you afterwards. This webinar will be recorded. A link of the recording will be sent to all registrants, so you don't have to take crazy amounts of notes if you don't want to. And this will also be archived on our website in a few days as well. So all this information will be waiting for you afterwards. So sit back, relax, enjoy. And I guess, all right, without any further ado, I'm going to pass it over to Anita to take it away.
Thanks, Scott. And first of all, thank you so much for calling me Anita. Okay, my name is Dr. Paschall, and I so prefer Anita. So from here on out, that's how you want to refer to me. I got a lot of background in this, guys. I have been doing this for well over 15 years, and I've counseled more than 10,000 applicants. Actually, myself, I hold an MD from UNC Chapel Hill. My background is family medicine and reproductive health and family planning. I did a master's in education, and I have 2 PhDs in physiology and pharmacology, but please do not be impressed because Lord knows I felt like I did not want to get a job. So I actually worked for the World Health Organization for almost 15 years, and I was the director of a health professions advising program at an R1D1 university, and I've served on 5 different medical admissions committees. So when it comes to sort of the background noise and getting connected, I've been there just like you guys, though, getting ready to apply. And at this point in time, with the applications opening for keying in May and being ready for submission between May and June, the big hot topic for a lot of people is I got to get that personal statement written and what's important in it. So I'm here today to give you a little bit of insight on what we look for on my side of the table. So the first thing is I'm going to give you a little bit of background on the importance of that actual personal statement. I mean, that's kind of a no-brainer, but I'm going to give you it in a little bit of context. And then I'm going to talk to you about some ways to sort of focus that and target your personal statement to be most effective. So, you know, you guys have probably heard a lot of this before, and I want to sort of get us started by finding out kind of where you are in this whole process. And so I get my poll to actually work. I want to find out a little bit about when you guys are looking to apply so I know my audience. So if you could just real quickly check for me on when you're planning to apply. If you've already applied in the cycle, go ahead and check that. If you're applying in this upcoming cycle, meaning you're hoping to apply in June, which I would assume is the preponderance of folks, but if those of you are applying in the next cycle, and it looks like about almost 80% of you guys are applying in this upcoming cycle, I'm really excited to see about 20% of you guys doing some future planning. I mean, I love working with folks like you guys because this really is the time to think about this. So I'm going to go ahead and close this poll. So let's start with some stats. I'm sure you guys already know. If you figure that there are about 58,000 applicants to med school every year, and there are about 20,000 slots, that means that there are going to be about 40% of people who get accepted and about 60% sitting on the side of the road going, why did I not get in? Now, we all know that your MCAT and your GPA are going to be important screening tools. And they are. If you figure that the average school is going to get about 10,000 applications, they don't have enough hours in the day to just sit there and ponder every single application. So about 95% of all schools, actually almost 100% now, are using an electronic screen, basically putting in what their parameters are and screening as your application comes through on the base numerics. If you don't make that screen, you know, most of the time you're going to get weeded out. We know last year that about 32% of the people who didn't get in, so if we're looking at the 60% that didn't get in, about 32% of that did not have the baseline MCAT score to make it through the screens, okay? About 18% didn't have the baseline GPA. So that counts for about 50% of that 60% that didn't get in. So what happened to that other 50%? And there are several key things, but a big preponderance of that are on 2 avenues to start out. One, they didn't have the non-academic things that they needed, the parts of their application like their clinical experience, their service, their leadership. And the other was that they had an average listing on their personal statement and experiences. They didn't tell their story. They didn't stand out. And basically, we talk about people being blend masters. And I often use the example of if you've ever watched the Miss USA pageant or something like that, and you've sat there and you've watched all of the girls, and they're beautiful, great, everybody, they all look the same. They all stand out. And that's kind of like what happens with you. You've got a strong GPA, you got a strong MCAT, but so does everybody else in that pool. Okay, how do you stand out? And many schools say that your personal statement and your subsequent interview can count for 60% or more of your total admissions score. And so you've got to put it in a way that it puts it out there to make it different. And I'm going to tell you guys, I have, at this point in the application cycle, from reading personal statements for the whole first part of the year, personal statements that I've read in our committee reviews, and personal statements for students I'm working at, if I hear I want to help, serve, like science, my Nana died, it's everything I want to be a doctor, I'm going to lose my mind, because we see it over and over and over again. So the first tip I'm going to give you guys is to write, rewrite, write again, let it sit, rewrite. This is not something that is going to be done in the first sitting. It's not going to be done in the first 24 hours, but you got to get to it at a point. So I've kind of put together 10 basic tips, and a lot of them sound like no-brainers, but the truth is that there really is a lot to say about it. So what are my 10 key points to remember in making your personal statement? The first thing that I'm going to tell you guys is to really sit down and figure out who you are. And my first piece of advice is that you want to sit down and write out a timeline of kind of your journey from things that you've done throughout your life. Was there maybe something that happened in your childhood? Was there potentially a loved one who died? Did you have an accident? Was there some experience, maybe some aspect in your family, whatever? But do sort of a timeline through your childhood, through your middle school and high school years, and specifically key things throughout your collegiate experience that are going to help to reaffirm who you are. One of the biggest things is back off the cliches. And it's really funny because I've got a little cartoon where there's a medical admissions officer, and he's standing there and he's got on his white lab coat and he's got the med student right there, and he goes, "Tell me why you want to be a doctor. You are not allowed to use the words science, grandparent died, help and serve, and I really want to make a difference. I want to be a doctor. How can you explain that?" And I challenge you all to do that. And you literally see the med student's head starting to explode, because although wanting to help and serve and loving science and having someone close to you who's experienced an illness and wanting to make a difference and wanting to work with underserved people are all very admirable qualities, they become like that most annoying TV commercial that you watch on TV that you hear over and over and over again. You want to be a Super Bowl ad. You want to be the unique, different statement of who you are with conviction that is going to catch our attention. So as you go through your list of things that you've done, you need to figure out how you've grown from them and try to find things that make compelling statements. And I'm going to give you some examples in a few minutes, but let's move on to our other points so that we can go from there. The next is be interesting. And I know that sounds kind of silly, but we really want to know who you are. Now, you want to be interesting to the point that if you're approaching your personal statement, remember that you've got, depending upon the application service, between 4,500 and 5,300 characters, counting spaces, okay? So you want to be direct and you want to be concise, but you also need to create visuals. Oh, and by the way, do not use contractions in your personal statement. Cannot, don't, can't. Be very careful. And it's a sticking point, but you would be amazed at how many of us on the review side immediately misspellings, improper grammar, punctuation is an immediate deterrent because of the numbers that we read. We're looking for reasons, okay? So when you start to think about your personal statement, I want you to approach it as if it's 5 to 6 paragraphs of your journey. That first paragraph has got to catch my attention. Think about it when you watch a trailer for a movie. Think about it when you watch the first minutes of a show. What catches your attention that makes you want to read to the next thing? You can use an example, you can use a story. It's going to be kind of creating a theme about who you are that is going to reflect who you are as a person. Now, again, it is your personal statement. There is probably at least 5 to 7 times a week that somebody reaches out to me and says, I just can't figure out what to write in my personal statement. Can you tell me what would be important to write? I tell you what, why don't you guys, if I do that for you, I'd like for you to write a personal statement about me. Go read my LinkedIn profile and go write my personal statement. You can't do it. This is your journey. The other big mistake that people make is that they will start to talk about somebody that's passed, some experience has happened, and that whole personal statement is full of their experiences about the loss of their grandpa. I really sympathize for you, but your grandpa's not trying to get into med school. You are. We've got to figure out who you are. So what we're looking for is that you've created and you've done the things that you need to do, but they're also different. Because as we're reading them, we're going, would I want this person in my med school class, or how are they going to fit in? And what kind of physician are they going to be? So the first is we're looking for a different view on you. So that's going to start with a catch. There are going to be 3 to 4 key paragraphs in your personal statement that are about things that you've done. One needs to be clinical. Ideally, one needs to be service, because those are 2 big things we're looking for. And I get people who ask me a lot, I'm going to do my 15 experiences. Can I talk about something in my personal statement that I'm also going to talk about in my experiences? Heck yeah, because if it's important enough to make an experience, it's probably had an important role in your personal statement. And we actually generally review these by different folks, and oftentimes it's the person who reads your personal statement who may also do an interview for you. So it is important to highlight those things. You can expand on it in your experiences, you can expand on it in the secondary, but it's fine to reflect on it as part of your personal statement. But as you're doing that, okay, you need to avoid the other aspect of it. So rather than just talking about your grandpa or talking about one particular experience, the other thing I notice is as I call it, the egocentric. It is, I did this and I did that and I went here and I went there. At all costs, if you can avoid using the word I. Okay, and it's fine. I mean, periodically you're going to throw it in to start a sentence, but find different ways to transition sentences and find different ways to express it. And one of the biggest things that frustrates us most, and I say it's a politician's answer, okay, such that would say, I'll give you a good example. Teaching, TAing, and tutoring, often important on an application checklist. Why are they important? Because it's important for you to have experience with taking complicated information and rephrasing it in a way that somebody else can actually figure out what's going on. Think about the times that you've asked somebody who's been to the doctor, and after they've come back, it's like, what did they say or what did they do? Happens with my mother all the time. And it's clear that he told her something, but she didn't understand it. Okay, it's where I say you can be the greatest physician in the world, but if somebody walks into your room and you go, you fat, you got diabetes, you gonna die, they're gonna tune you out and they're not gonna be receptive to what you say. But if you can explain to them, and this happened with my own grandfather, he had diabetes and he had no understanding that having the sugars and diabetes were one and the same thing. Nobody ever helped close that loop for him. And so if you can sit down and gain their appreciation, their trust, and show that you are empathetic to their situation and that you are partnered in this, that you are bought in with them and vice versa, they're likely to listen to you more. So if you can talk about an experience where you served as a TA in a class, and one of the most meaningful things to you was the appreciation of teaching somebody maybe how to understand, and I often talk about this, when you took biochemistry or you took organic chemistry or biology, one of the most difficult things to understand was protein synthesis. How do you get from a gene on your DNA to creating a protein? And when I used to teach that to my students, I always taught them that making a protein was like surfing from a cookbook, that your DNA is a giant cookbook full of genes or recipes. When you want to cook your recipe, you want to find a gene to make a protein, you look it up in your cookbook and you write it down. That's your mRNA. To put that recipe together, you have to get your ingredients. That's the tRNA that goes and gets all the amino acids. When it's time to assemble your recipe, you set your recipe down with your cookbook. That's when the mRNA sits on the ribosomal RNA to translate it. And then you bring the ingredients from the tRNA to make your recipe. Sometimes you'll mess with your recipe beforehand. That's pre-translational. Sometimes you'll fix it afterwards, and that's post-translational. But in the end, you have your cake or your recipe. In the end, you have your protein. Finding a way to explain it such that people understand it. When you do the same thing in your personal statement, don't tell me that you gained an understanding of communicating information to people who didn't have the same knowledge as you through your TA experience, and this will help you when you become a physician. Oh my goodness, I hear that all the freaking time. No, give me an example. Take me there and show me that you truly understand what it's about. And don't tell me how it's going to help you as a physician to communicate. Give me an example of where maybe you saw a physician use that same power to communicate to a patient. Show your level of understanding. Don't give me a politician's answer. All right. So as I rambled on, don't ramble. You got 5,300 characters. You got to spit it out. And if you use 3/4 of your page to tell me about your grandpa who died, you're going to have very little time to tell me about your service, your leadership, or whatever comes in there. Avoid 5-line sentences. Sometimes I get sentences in these personal statements that there aren't enough breadcrumbs to get me home. I can't figure out what you were talking about because the sentence is so long. Break it up. Be concise. Don't ramble, but make sure that it doesn't cause confusion. And I'm going to give you some tips on how to handle that here in the future. But it is very important to create visuals and be concise, okay? Now, a lot of people ask me about addressing their weaknesses in a personal statement. Okay, if you have things that are obvious, if you have a hiccup in your GPA, if something happened to you where there's going to be something that's going to show up on your transcript, or if you're reapplying, especially reapplicants, okay? As a reapplicant or somebody who's taken a gap time, or if there's something key in your application, you need to, 1, acknowledge that it occurred, 2, acknowledge how you grew from it, and 3, what you have done to correct it. So maybe you had something happen in your life that you took a period of time off and you had a dip in your GPA. And you can say that, although it was a difficult time, what you've learned from it and how you've progressed. As a reapplicant, if you applied too late, or if you didn't have enough clinical or whatever, you briefly address it. It should be a short paragraph, no more than 3 to 4 sentences, and move on. Because on your secondaries, almost every single secondary says, are there things you would like to address? So make sure you address it because it's out there, okay? But remember to not ramble on about it, because you don't want it to become that beacon on your application, and you don't want the whole focus of your personal statement to be that negativity. You want the positive and the other reasons they should select you. All right. So transitions. Oh, Jiminy Cricket. This is a huge one. So remember, we're saying you're going to focus on 5 to 6 paragraphs. There is going to be an intro catch that's supposed to make me want to read the next thing. You want to make sure that there is a conscious flow from one topic to the other about what's going on. It's not uncommon for me to read a personal statement that spends, half or 2/3 of it talking about one particular issue, and then you really truly get the feeling that it's like the person goes, holy crap, I've still got to talk about service and my clinical or whatever. And so it's kind of like thrown in a concluding paragraph or the next to the last paragraph. again, that's coming in this write, rewrite, rewrite, rewrite. But if you outline what are going to be your core 4 to 5 paragraphs or potential paragraphs, and then you want to bullet point the content of those, and then write the base part, and then figure out how to flow one to another. I remember when my son wrote his personal statement for medical school, and he's a second-year med student right now. Actually, he's now a third year. He's studying for his step 1. And he opened his personal statement with an analogy. He was actually referencing listening to talking to his grandparents on the phone, and he said he couldn't hear them over the helicopters in the back because at 75 at the time, they were on with the Red Cross doing relief work following a hurricane. And he talked about that it had kind of been ingrained in his head about how to serve. And my mother was telling him, although it was 9 o'clock at night, they had these lunches left over and they were going to start canvassing the town, handing them out. And he flowed from that intro about service to one of his first most meaningful service components. And then in that, he flowed to an indigent care need where he talked about some of his own work serving internationally in Haiti and in his own work in an indigent care clinic. And so you flow one to the next to the next, and you'll have to do some rearranging, but you've got to make sure that we can follow the path of what you're doing. It's really funny. It's sad that I should have to say this, but use the active voice. I don't know how many people I have read their personal statements and they literally speak of themselves in the third person. And it was like, we did this, or he said this, and then he did that. This is your journey. This is your personal statement. So avoid using third person reflections as you talk. Okay, so this is one of my biggest and most important things to you guys. When I say seek multiple opinions, my thing is ask several people you trust for feedback, but ask people you don't know, okay, or don't know you well. Maybe there's a classmate or someone, and you don't necessarily want them to critique it overall, but figure out if there's enough breadcrumbs to get them home, okay? Can they figure out what you're talking about or what it means? And then specifically, ask them, are there parts that were confusing, or did you feel like you were there, or did you feel like it was boring? Ask for honest opinions. I say that you should write it and rewrite it. And when you get to what you feel is close to a final, okay, I would have people that just get a general take if feel like that's a reflection of you. But then I would have at least 2 to 3 people who don't know you well review those different drafts and see if they can follow that flow. You'd be amazed how much or how little they can pick up. Because if they can't follow it, I can promise you an admissions committee person is not. On the average, we are going to spend probably about 1.5 minutes to 2.5 minutes reviewing an entire application. That's a personal statement and experiences. That means we are skimming, looking for high points, unique things that make me want to read, and connectivity. If it is full of a bunch of I's and why I want to be's and things that are dry and canned, we are unlikely to want to follow that additional flow. All right. It is extremely important that you should highlight interesting aspects of your journey, not just tell your entire life story. I read one yesterday and it was honestly, I've wanted to be a doctor since I was 5 and my daddy's a doctor and it's all I know. And I was like, oh, beat me with a stick. Okay, it is really got to tell the journey in a concise Cliff Notes version of where you want to be. Okay, so that gets us through a lot of our initial key components. And so the last thing that I talk about, and I'm going to give you some examples here, is to mind your R's, even though it's not necessarily an R, which is write, review, revise, repeat. A general timeline of what I say is that between February and the 1st of March, where we are right now, if you're applying this year, you should have already made your first draft on your personal statement. Okay, and it's fine if you're applying to AMCAS and we're thinking 5,300 characters, okay, counting spaces, okay, it's fine if you start out at about 6,800, okay. If you start out at 10,000, you're going to be really hard to cut that down, okay. So you should do your first by now. You should have that second draft that should have been reviewed by at least a couple of family members and one other person done by the end of March. And then you want to enter final draft stage in April. Set your goal for April 30th to have the final draft of your personal statement and experiences done, which, by the way, if you want some feedback on experiences, tune in on April 5th, because I'm going to be doing a webinar on experiencing your experiences and what are the key things. We've got a whole series of webinars, so you guys can check them out online. But it's important to make sure that you're following these along, because I'm going to do one on things that keep you out of school. I'm going to be doing an "oh no you didn't" common mistakes we see, and I'm really going to try to get you tips to get you to stand out so that you actually get noticed. Okay. There are several other qualities of things that left those 50% behind, but I'm going to tell you, if through the gate, if you make it through a screen, if you've spent 4 or 5 years getting that great MCAT and that great GPA, and you blow it on your number of experiences and your personal statement, you may never get to that all-important interview. So before I close this out and turn it over to Scott in just a second, I want to do another poll because I got to find out some information about you guys, but I want to share a few more bits of information. Okay. So when we talk about when you come through for a review, this is a great time for you guys to sit down and take stock of where you are right now. Okay. You're coming into, it's March, 3 months from now, you hope to submit that application. If you're submitting to Texas and Nokomis, 2 months from now, less than 2 months. Where do you stand? Okay, so we've got the admitting GPA, typically 3.65 to 3.75, about a 3.45 to a 3.55 for DO, MD 3.65. I get that you may be like a 3.3, a 3.4, but your heart is really in it. But remember, 10,000 applicants, what you're standing up against. What we say is that the average school will get about 10,000 applications. About 90% of schools now automatically generate secondaries without even reviewing an application. There are no guarantees. There are no promises that will get reviewed. It is just left as an option. So keep that in mind when you're selecting your number of schools, okay? But those are your screening parameters. We know that you're shooting for a 509 on your MCAT, okay? Trying to get us into that 85th percentile. Again, like I told you, if you're looking at schools, please screen on the median MCAT and GPA, not the range. There are always outliers, but score on the median. Each school should be no more than 2 to 3 points outside your top MCAT score. Again, I hope you're putting out any questions that you have. I'm just trying to give you some overview. Once you've looked at what your base parameters are and you're starting to write out your personal statement, do that timeline and then start writing out what are going to be your 15 experiences. A good applicant is going to have to combine things to make 15. For instance, you may have 15 different shadowing experiences that you're going to lump together for clinical shadowing over 3 years for 500 hours. If to make 15 experiences, you have to write, I shadowed a cardiologist, I shadowed a family doc as a different experience, then you may not be ready. If you're having to pull into too many hobbies, if you can't come up with 15 solid things, and we generally say it's better to do fewer, like 12 or 13 really good ones than 15 slimy ones or whatever, little one-offs, you may not be ready. The average admitting GPA is 26 to 27, which means a lot of people are taking gap years out there. Take stock of who you are as an applicant and what your standing is, okay? Because I'm going to tell you, reapplication, I get lots of kids who go, I just want to get my name out there. I just want to see. It's a career you're going to be doing for the rest of your life, okay? So figure out what you want to do. And if it means taking a year or 2 years, that's a whole lot better to get in the first round than to be a reapplicant. Because most schools that I work, actually all the schools that I work with, we have stricter standards for reapplicants. There is that assumption that you weren't informed. Okay, so those are good guidelines. Start by mapping out your lifeline and by mapping out your 15 experiences and where they stand and how many that you actually have. And then start writing out your personal statement and your experiences. Have those things ready. When the application services open in May, if you're still in school, as soon as your spring grades are ready, send your transcript so that AMCAS can start aligning those. General rule is it's going to take about 4 to 6 weeks to verify your application. We have all kinds of tips and information that I do through my counseling programs. So I'm happy to answer any questions you have. Real quickly, I'd like to do this poll. And let me get my poll done here, which does not want to, there we go. As you guys know, we have like all types of services to help you out. So if you're coming in and you need advice, or if you haven't taken your MCAT, let me know if you would like any information on how to best prepare for your MCAT. For me, I work with all the med, DO, any type of admissions. I do PA, pharmacy, vet, you name it. If you have more questions that you would like answered, if you need more information on navigating this process, and it is important, it's not just submitting it, it's how you write it, let me know. Also, if you need any help with boosting that GPA or struggling with some of those courses, for me, Lord, how mercy, it was like physics. I wished I had our online tutoring available, because it was always me at midnight going, holy cow, monkey in a tree, I'm gonna shoot that monkey out of a tree. With what velocity does he hit the ground? Honey, I am a scientist. I'm going to dissect that monkey. I don't care. He's dead. Physics just did not make sense to me. And it made sense in class, but it never seemed to make sense when I actually got there. So I'm going to turn it over to Scott for a few minutes just to tell you a little bit about our services. And he's been taking all of your questions. So I'm going to give him a couple of minutes. We've got plenty of time left, and I'll be back to answer your questions in just a few. Scott, I'm turning it over to you. Maybe. There we go.
Thanks so much, Anita. So it's our job here at the Princeton Review to help you navigate this process, right? So this is certainly a first step for a lot of students, whether you're at the beginning, if you're in the middle, if you're toward the end, we're here to help you, right? There's 3 key components that most students need to tackle in order to get into that dream med school, and that's getting a great GPA, a great MCAT score, and then putting together that great application. And luckily, the Princeton Review could help you in all 3 of those areas. So if you haven't already been to our website, definitely start there. There's tons of free resources to help get you going. So we have a free full-length practice test. We have a free med school search engine. So if you're not sure where you want to go to med school yet, you could search by different areas, states, criteria, and there's a profile created for each school. And included in that profile will be information like average MCAT score, GPA information, and then there's a link directly to the school's website. So again, we already gathered all this information for you, so we're here to help you start that journey. We have a great med admissions program, again, led by Anita and her team, so we'll talk a little bit more about that later too. We do have prep for the MCAT. One thing I wanted to mention is we do have a great MCAT prep free trial going on, so you can go to our website, it's just princetonreview.com/MCAT free trial, and this will give you access into our online tools for free. So again, if you do nothing else after this session with regard to MCAT prep, take advantage of that free trial. You get a full free-length practice test, so 7 hours of MCAT fun awaits you. You'll get a detailed score report breakdown. So again, this will help guide your prep moving forward. So if you are prepping on your own, this will kind of give you a map on what you need to work on. And then we also have homework help, which Anita kind of referenced before. So this is a great, great product. If you wouldn't mind going to the next slide, Anita.
Yep, there we are.
We call it our pre-med GPA booster. So again, this will help you improve that GPA if you're taking classes currently. We have online tutors available 24/7. It's truly amazing to me. It's on demand. You can schedule it. The great thing is if you're having a problem with an orgo question 3 o'clock in the morning, you can log into our website and be matched with a tutor usually in less than 2 minutes. So it's amazing that we have this product. You could upload any questions you have, work with a tutor, and you can log off. So a great, great resource to have in your back pocket. You can access it on mobile, desktop, and we have tutors in over 40 subjects. So again, all the key sciences are in there. Great, great resource. So check it out. There's also a free trial on our website for that as well. So homework help, check it out. And then test prep with options for every schedule and budget. Again, we're here to help you navigate the process. So once you take that free practice test, you get that score, and then you want to kind of put that in range to your target score, right? See what you need to do to get to that target score. And you also want to identify what kind of student you are too, right? So if you're the kind of student that wants to eat, sleep, and breathe the MCAT, maybe our immersion course would be good for you. Again, this is 370 hours of math bootcamp style instruction. If you're the kind of student that wants to go over full content and strategy review, maybe our MCAT Ultimate course would be good for you. If you're the kind of student that's coming in and you feel like you're great in all the subjects, but you just need to know how to apply that to the MCAT, then maybe our MCAT strategy course would be for you. And both the Ultimate and strategy course, these are offered in person as well as live online. So again, if you want that in-person experience or if you want that online experience, we have these options for you. And then if you're the kind of student that wants to work on your own, if you are driven and motivated and you can get through it on your own, our MCAT self-paced option gives you all of our tools and you can work through at your own pace. So you have 9 months access to all of our online tools, tests, drills, videos, and you just kind of work out your own plan. So again, a lot of students love that because again, you're driven, you're motivated, and you know what you want to get to. And finally, if you're the kind of student that wants one-on-one coaching, we have one-on-one private tutoring available as well. And again, you can do this in person or online, and it's crafted, customized just for you. So lots of different options. Take advantage of that free trial, kind of see where you're starting. And then we also have the wonderful world of mid-school admissions led by Anita and her team. Anita, I don't know if you want to say anything special here, if you want to do a little plug for your team.
Oh, we got, so we work as a team. We've got a set of qualified counselors, just like myself, who have worked in med admissions and on admissions committees for years. And then we have a whole set of coaches, equally trained, have been to med school, done the same type of thing. We work collaboratively as a team. We basically offer a package to just help you with your primary application. If you haven't have already submitted your primary, we also have packages to help with secondary and interview prep, but most folks do our comprehensive sort of, and it's really the whole, I'm here to work with you the entire year and beyond. It's to get your primary out, to get your personal statement, your experiences, your school list, and fine-tune your letters of recommendation. But one of the biggest mistakes, and I will tell you 200% of the time, we were actually just talking about this in one of the admissions offices I work with on Friday, how many kids we lose in the secondaries because they underestimate. You spend 3 months writing your primary. Well, secondaries come out from 90% of your schools. Let's say you submit to 20 schools and you get 20 secondaries. Each secondary is typically 3 to 5 essays. So let's just go for the middle, 4. They typically come out all the 1st of July. So, and the turnaround time is recommended of 7 to 14 days. So you're easily staring down the throat of 80 to 80 plus essays in a very short period of time. And then schools start making decisions on those all important interviews in August through September and October. And so it's how do you work and focus and condense and get those secondaries done out and right in a timely manner without cutting and pasting your way into purgatory, because you don't know how often I get clearly copied and pasted essays where people put another school's name in it. It's an accident. We all do it. How many times have you sent an email that you copied and pasted to somebody else with somebody's name in it? It happens, but it can make the difference. And then interview prep, you don't know the number of kids that we get, because on an average, the schools I work with average anywhere from 7,000 to 15,000 applications. We're going to scale that down. Again, that's why we automatically generate secondaries to offer anywhere from 500 to 300 interviews. Okay, so you've got like a 1% chance for 100 slots. When we get to 500 to 300 people we're interviewing to narrow down to those 100, what's going to set the difference? How you dress, how you act, and what you say to us to be memorable. That's not the same thing. So those are the things that I work with folks on. And then what you do after the interview. How do you follow them up? Not just thank you notes, but letters of intent, etc. So that's what our whole team works together to do in med admissions counseling. All right, Scott, do we have any promos or anything to tell folks about? Otherwise, I'm going to answer some questions.
Yeah, let's do the questions. Always check out our website for the latest promos, but I definitely want to, there's tons of great questions here, so I want to get to as many of them as possible. So
give it to me.
All right, so if you're ready, I'll hit you with a few here. There were just a couple of general questions with people wanting to know exactly what experiences are. They might not have encountered that yet. So if you just want to say what an experience is, and we kind of grow off of that a little bit, there's a couple other questions.
Yeah, absolutely. So there are the main components of every primary is you got to go in and key in your entire transcript. That's absolutely a pain in the royal behind, but you got to do it. And there are lots of questions I can help with on that. There's the personal statement, anywhere from 4,500 characters for AMCAS to 5,000 characters for Texas with 2 additional essays to 5,300 for AMCAS. Okay, so that's your journey of who you are. And each application asks you to list your most relevant experiences. Now, here are some key things. Experiences should not be from high school. They should be collegiate and beyond. And obviously, the more frequent or the more continued, the better off. If the only time high school counts is if you started it in high school and continued it into and through college, into your part of college. Generally, we tell students to think about their experiences in 5 to 6 key categories. The first is academic. When you're thinking outside of your GPA and your test score, you're going to think about research. For research to be strong, it doesn't have to be published, but generally we like to see a minimum of semester, but for it to hold the most weight, generally at least 2 semesters to a year with 100 hours or more. Study abroad. Now, study abroad does not have to be a full semester. That can be a semester away. It can be a summer alternative spring break or something like that. What we're looking for are experiences outside of the U.S. that have put you and exposed you to different cultures to gain empathy and understanding of cultural diversity. TAing and tutoring is another big academic experience that we talk about, be it that you're tutoring after school, independent tutoring that's unpaid, or directed paid tutoring, or working as a teaching assistant. Fluency in different languages, okay? A big take to the table thing, because it is important to be able to communicate. So those are some of the basic, what we talk about, non-academic, academic experiences. Clinical is obviously a huge component. And this is a big area where I see people fall behind, because not only are we looking for hours, but we're looking for diversity. Okay, so we say a minimum of 3 to 5 different specialty areas. One of these should be primary care, and at least for 100 total hours. And that would be shadowing experience. Now, I'm going to tell you, when it comes down to it, and this is the reason a lot of people are taking glide years, is more and more schools are wanting to see, how have you been different? Have you rolled up your sleeves and had directed patient contact, working as a CNA, like in a nursing home or a hospital, working as a medical scribe, or getting your EMT. The big thing that scribing has become very popular. One thing that you should know is that you cannot enter an experience that is in the future. Okay, so if you've already started it. So for instance, if you get a job as a scribe, say in May, you can actually estimate your hours going forward through the entire application cycle. Remember, we're screening electronically, so we're going to look for numbers. So anytime you can group things together for time and numbers, that's going to make us pull you in a screen. I had a student last year who had been volunteering with hospice for 35 hours a week. He had about 5,000 hours with hospice. He had a great GPA and an MCAT, and he got denied by a school. And I reached back out to the school I was working with, and I was like, why'd you deny this student? He's amazing. And they said he didn't have enough service. And I said, what do you mean he didn't have enough service? He has 5,000 hours with hospice, which is a big standout for us. And they looked back and reflected, and he had only entered in the 35 hours as a weekly, not as his total. They ended up offering him a secondary, and he has actually already been accepted. So, I mean, it is in how you write it and critique it. But clinical, paid, and unpaid. Look at diversity. One should be primary care. I would far rather see 150 hours in 5 specialties than 500 hours in just one. Look for that paid clinical. Other things we talk about are leadership. Now, I don't care if you were president of the Mickey Mouse Club or of your sorority or of a bank. We're looking for growth through leadership potential. So think about maybe things that you've done where you took lead roles that weren't necessarily title related. Service is huge. Okay, you're in a service-driven sort of a perspective, and I see lots of people who just one-offs through college. We are looking ideally for something that's at least 6 months on a regular basis for at least 50 hours total. And more importantly, we're looking for things that are unique and outside your comfort zone. Other types of experiences may be like unique hobbies or something that you do. I don't know if any of you guys are fly fishermen, but I'm a big fly fisherman out there, and I'm getting ready to go to Isla Morada and fish for tarpon. You may find somebody else who's equally interested in that. What are unique things about you, your journey, and your background? Are you first generation college? Have you had to work throughout your entire academic career to support your education? So all of these types of things are, you want to make sure that you've not only hit the check boxes, but you've hit them strongly and uniquely. And that is one of the most important things that I can tell you. We are looking for things that how you tweak them to show that unique aspect. So that's a big, broad reaching experiences, but I'm hoping that covered a lot of y'all's questions.
Yeah, that was great. Thank you. And I know a lot of people had questions about whether this is going to be recorded. Yes, we are going to send a recording link out to you afterwards. So if you joined us late, we're going to send you the whole recording. So let's jump into another couple questions if you're up for it, Anita.
Yep.
All right. So someone just had a question about if they can mention things they're going to do in the summer in their personal statement.
All right, so there are two aspects of this. There are a couple of application services that will allow you to enter things in the future, others that won't. So there are various perspectives. So like Texas will, AMCAS won't, ACOMAS won't. However, please don't freak out about that, because there are two different ways you can address that. Number one, you can reference it in your personal statement. You can reference it in another experience if it ties into something. Maybe, you know, I've done these trips abroad and this summer I will be doing this. And then you can hit it up on your secondary. So don't panic if it's not an experience. You can reference it, but if you haven't started it, you cannot put it down. Here's another thing. And I'm not telling y'all to lie, but I'm also telling you how to coerce this. If you have something that is absolutely confirmed, maybe you've got 3 doctors you're going to shadow this summer and you are dead certain about it and you're going to do it, you can reference them in your total shadowing experiences for the total number of hours, because then you can talk about it in your secondaries of where you are. Those are about the only real areas where you've got a little bit of leeway. One other quick thing that I can tell you guys, hospital volunteering. Lord have mercy, how much I see that. Everybody volunteers at the freaking hospital. And not that that's a bad thing, but that's not clinical experience. It's generally considered a service. We will generally look the other way because we know you're getting exposure to patients and physicians. We will often say, let's say you've got 120 hours of volunteering at a hospital. You can split that out if you worked on different floors and potentially count like 80 hours of volunteering as a service and maybe like 40 hours of that as part of your clinical exposure in your different categories. So that's sometimes the way you can kind of finesse those areas. You just have to be careful that you can actually give examples of things you gain through that, or we will nail you in an interview, I can tell you. All right, Scott.
All right, so we've got another one here. How about if applying as a non-traditional student? Any other words of wisdom?
Yes, absolutely. All right. We love non-traditional students. I'm going to tell you, you bring diversity of background and you bring an older experience. One of the biggest aspects for us is that, and I was one of you guys, I was a pre-med. I was a hamster on a treadmill. Got to get through high school, got to get through college, got to get to med school because it's such a long journey. And one of the biggest things that non-traditional students bring to the table is real life, real world experiences. Having been out in the world and working with other people, having to take your own job, maybe manage a family, working with different populations, not only different types of populations, but different situations where you may be a leader or somebody who was over you. These types of experience and maturity that you bring to an application are huge, huge to a med school. We always give more look or a second look to non-traditional with strong credentials, as well as people who have taken gap years. I've never had a single student take a gap or glide year that did not benefit from it unless you sat on your butt and played video games at home. So non-traditional, I think you want to focus on things you have learned in that non-traditional journey. What different kind of life experiences you're going to bring as a part of all of that.
Great, great. And I know you touched on it a little bit previously, but someone had a question about any other advice you might have for reapplicants. I know you mentioned it could be a tough.
Reapplicants, this is a big thing, okay? A lot of people, I mean, first of all, and I get it. Well, I didn't get denied when I applied the first time, but I do get it. I mean, I've applied for things that I haven't gotten before, and it's disappointing. And something like this, it's incredibly disappointing. But before you reapply, and hopefully you've been doing it in the process of this year, you have, and this is critical, you have to address the reasons that you did not get in. If your MCAT was subpar and you reapply without retaking it, it's a huge mark against you. If you applied with a 3.3 GPA and only to MD programs or whatever, and you're not seriously considering either applying osteopathic or applying to a special master's or a master's program before reapplying, it's a strike against you. There's also this misnomer. I'll have lots of people who go, okay, I know my GPA wasn't where it was. I'm going to apply to a master's program, but I'm also going to apply right now. What do we have to evaluate you against? If your GPA was low to begin with and you're not starting your master's until the fall, and we filled 90% of our class by the time you finish your first semester, we don't have anything to measure you against. So it is so much better to go, I'm going to take the time and I'm going to get at least 1 year of grad level coursework to hopefully offset a GPA before reapplying. And most of those applications for fall starts are due sometime between February and April. Some are done in June, but you need to be looking at those now. If clinical hours were what you were deficient on, or service, you better have been serving out the max and finding all kinds of clinical experience, or at least getting a job. So you need to, 1, address the reasons you didn't get in, 2, do a short summary paragraph in your personal statement that reflects on how you have improved. The great thing is you can roll all of your applications and just update them, but you need to show growth and journey in all of those updates. Next.
Okay, someone had a question about doing research and they're waiting to be published. It's something that they can mention even though they're not published yet?
Yes, it can. You can actually put, when you do your experiences, and it shouldn't be, there is not a separate sheet for publications. So when you talk about your research, I always tell people you should approach your experiences in like 3 bullet formats. And the first should be what the duties were or what you were involved in. So it should be almost like a you can't bullet on your experience, but like dash responsibilities in your research, what lab you worked in, what you did. The next part should be any, like you can do accolades or special things about it, like X number of hours or a leader of this, or publication in review or pending. And you can just put a note of that. And then your last point on every experience has got to be a couple of sentences about your growth, how you grew through it. Research, nobody cares about your research but you. I mean, we do, but that's what we always say. What I want to know is that you got an understanding that research ain't mixing some potions together and all of a sudden you're published. It's long, it's tedious, it's about teamwork. You know, if it's study abroad, it's about being outside your comfort zone and how you grew through that. I mean, I guarantee none of you have ever, if you've traveled abroad, did not feel perfectly comfortable the whole time you were gone. It's what you learned from walking in those steps, because your patients coming in to see you, they're going to be scared to death. You need to have that kind of empathy. So it's being able in every experience to show that growth. Scott, did that cover everything?
I've got 1 or 2 more if you're up for it.
Yep. Let's do 2 more. How's that?
Sounds like a plan. So this one kind of builds a little bit off of that whole experiences and whatnot. Let's see. So someone has 2 options for research opportunities this summer. So one is in the US and has an option to publish, and one is South Africa, doesn't have the option to publish, but is about a topic that they're more interested in.
No question, 8 days and Sunday. Okay, I would far rather see, remember what I told you about why people don't get in? Number one, what am I gonna remember about you? I want every one of you to think about your favorite TV show. Think about your favorite movie. You don't remember all the dialogue. You remember key memorable scenes. That's what we need about you. I'm going to remember the kid who did something really cool in Africa over somebody in a Stanchiol lab being researched. Unless you're doing PhD, MD, PhD all day long, go for the unique one. Absolutely.
Perfect. And I think this one might be a good way to kind of wrap it up here. So let's see here. So is it worth it to even apply to a school if your GPA is lower, but you have a higher MCAT score and lots of experience?
Okay, I'm assuming that's referring to the school that you're applying to and not just lower in general. So there are two sides to this. If you have a GPA that is lower than the base school, and actually, Scott, funny you should mention this because that chart I sent you, I want to get that chart up on the web very quickly. But there's actually kind of a display of where you can take GPA and you can take MCAT score and look at the number of people accepted. And what we say is that a strong MCAT will override a lower GPA to an extent. So we say the average is 3.65 to 3.75. If you get like a 515 MCAT, it will help override like a 3.4 GPA. Is it going to override a 3.1, a 3.2? Probably not. Okay, it's too much variance between those. Okay, but if you have a slightly lower GPA and a strong MCAT, the strong MCAT overcomes the poor GPA. However, a poor MCAT kills a 4.0 all day long. So if you got a 4.0, but you've got a 501, 502 on your MCAT, it is probably not going to overcome it no matter how much experience you have. Again, it's not that we don't care about you. It's that it's a pool of 10,000 people. We've got to whittle down to 500 who we're going to give interviews to. We're going to have enough people to fill that slot with a strong GPA and a strong MCAT. You've got to address those things to be the strongest applicant possible. So what I generally say is that if your MCAT is more than 2 points below your average, that's going to be an extreme reach. Okay, if you're just doing your basic reach, it's 2 points above where your score is. All right, and then your GPA, I say generally we go about 0.15. So like from 3, if their average is 3.6, you would say about 3.45 to 3.4. Hopefully that tied everything in and made sense. I want to thank you guys all for tuning in today. I mean, we've used our time well. I'm thrilled because I always like to give the information, but I think there's a lot more value in being able to have time to answer some questions. So I hope we really keyed in on some things for you guys. Please stay tuned. I'm going to do a Facebook Live event in the next week and then our webinar in April. So follow us along. We've got them all up on the website. Scott's helping me out there, and I'm looking forward to working with you guys and answering your questions in the future.
Yeah, thanks so much, Anita, for everything. And again, if we didn't get to your question, we'll gladly reach out to you afterwards. You could also, if you have any questions after today's session, hit us up at questions@review.com. We'll certainly get back to you quickly. And again, on our webinars, we're going to be doing a bunch in April and May, so keep an eye on our website for all those upcoming events. And once again, thank you, Anita. Everyone have a great day, and thank you for attending.
Hey, and by the way, we actually have a survey on the website under Med Admissions. So if you guys are kind of trying to figure out where you are, I've got like a 10-question survey that sort of asks you how many you've done, where you are, help get a sense of kind of where you are right now, and are you ready to apply, or what, should you be looking at this time frame to apply. So feel free to take the survey. All right?
Sounds great. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, have a good day.